Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is Dr. D. Yvonne Young. Yvonne is a globally recognized authority in human behavior, leadership psychology, and the science of emotional mastery. As an ICF Master Certified Coach, he holds a prestigious designation awarded to fewer than 1% of coaches worldwide, a testament to his evidence-based approach and the measurable, lasting change he creates for high achievers. From the TEDx stage, where his talks have garnered over 5 million views, to the pages of Forbes and MSNBC, Dr. Young has become a trusted advisor for Fortune 100 executives and global institutions alike. He is the best-selling author of Another Chance, and we are particularly honored to discuss his latest work, Leading from the Heart, which serves as a definitive guide to redefining self-empathy and building deeper human bonds. We're excited to have Yvonne with us today, where we'll explore the transition from emotional to ethical intelligence. Specifically, how leaders and high achievers can move beyond performing present to practicing genuine self-empathy and compassionate leadership as outlined in Dr. Young's new book, Leading from the Heart. It's so great to have you on the show, Dr. Young. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So have I. So your new book, Leading from the Heart, came out of a deeply personal season of your life, navigating the loss of two very close people to you. How did walking through that experience shift the way you think about empathy, not just as a concept, but as something you actually live every day?
Well, I think that is an aspect. The deeper aspect of it is 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I hadn't been mischievous or cutting up. So to get an oral cancer years after being the guy that was living almost a Rastafarian lifestyle, and I don't drink. So these people were loving on me and supporting me through my cancer journey. God only would guess that I would be burying these people and I'd be back to a normal life. So that was a wake-up call. It helped me to stop and really think about appreciation and gratitude just for life and empathizing with myself, because that was the route toward healing, was self-compassion and self-empathy.
Nice. And I know that you have worked and spent over 2 decades coaching different NFL players, Fortune 100 CEOs, Grammy winners. I'm just curious how you got into this particular type of work and what's the common thread that you see in the high achievers that you worked with?
When my mother was dying, I was, about 38, 39 years old at the time. I was in pre-med, looking at neurosurgery was where I was headed. And I guess God, the divine, the universe, however people want to refer to it, had a different plan for me. I realized then, after meeting with mentors and advisors, that, one of them said, well, man, that book you wrote, Tired of Being Alone. Now this, I don't even know how in the hell he called it a book. It's a booklet, in my opinion, but it had T.D. Jakes in it. And I was at that point realizing, after talking to these advisors, that, okay, well, maybe there's something to it. My brain was on, I'll be doggone if I'm going to sit here and listen to people, bitch and moan about life while sitting on a couch. That's just not something I'm going to do. Well, one of my then advisors said, well, there's this thing called neuroscience and neuropsychology. I'm a big fanatic about brain function. Obviously, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, but that was my thing. And my doctoral thesis was on the placebo effect. So when I started looking at how does belief, cognition, the physiology of the brain, how does all that come together? And when I started realizing that this is the unexplored territory, because even if you have surgery, what another term for surgery is an intentionally inflicted wound, because that's exactly what we're doing when we cut you. If part of surgery and part of healing is belief and expectation, we know for a fact that a patient that is scared to death, that doesn't want to have a surgery, that their chance of one making it through it is, it's compromised. And there's even the potential they may not just because of this belief. But we've also learned that when someone has a faith-based belief system or just a really positive attitude, when the clinician influences people more to hope than despair, then the outcome is intention. And that intention brings about a positive outcome. So when I started putting the pieces together, it was real simple. If I can figure out how to connect willful intention, the brain, neuroscience, and cognition, I was all in for being a coach that's evidence and research based using neuroscience as a foundation.
Wow. Wow. Everything that you just said, it kind of fascinates me. And I was listening to a few of your just snippets of your TEDx talks, and just the way you describe empathy and just that power of disruption or the concept of good trouble. Those ideas are really fascinating to me. Are those common threads that you see in the high achievers that you worked with, especially when it comes to their relationship with self-compassion?
Yeah, I am fascinated by many of the people I've had the pleasure of working with. I'm not going to out of HIPAA name names, but
Mhm.
these are people whose names are hanging in the arenas they play in a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, as well as the people that you see in film or the leaders in these Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 50 companies, there is a passion that these people have and a commitment toward excellence where they're not at this point looking back and saying, "Hey, do you see what I've done? Do you know who I am?" They have a direct relationship with meaning. They have a direct relationship with intention and with doing something that is reflective of their expectation for their lives, and they understand the value of what they do and how it connects to the lives of others. Given this, a pro athlete is a good example that takes the time to go to the Shriners Hospital, or the CEO that makes sure that out of the millions of dollars generated, we're going to make sure we make the world a better place by putting lights and wells in places that don't have it, or offering scholarships to people who can't afford to attend tier 1 universities, or something just as simple as understanding their inspirational contribution, where they may tell a child or even adult, you know what, I appreciate you and you got this. And if I can do this, there's nothing you can't do. So when I started noticing that there was a connection and an alignment with intention, with self awareness, self empathy, compassion for other people, then I realized, what if we, and when I say we, I'm talking about my practice as well as my tech company with what I just created, Uriel. What if we could guide people toward that level of self awareness? What if we could help people to overcome their doubt, the voices in their head that they've heard, the criticisms where people have broken them as young as early childhood, or the trauma and vicissitudes of life? What if we could get you to understand that there's a relationship between that and your greatness? And that's been the foundation for my coaching practice, as well as what I've created in Uriel, now my AI.
Nice. Okay. Okay. So, listening to just that statement alone, how you describe self-compassion or compassion for others is quite interesting to me. I don't know that I've quite heard it described in that way. On the other side of that, how do people know when they've crossed that line from, pouring into themselves and becoming great? Like where does that line stop between there and, becoming self-absorbed?
There's a saying that some people, well, I'll use an example. I had one of my clients say to me, "Well, Doc, I just hit $1 million. We finally broke the $1 million mark." And I said, "Well, that's the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end."
Mm.
When you become aware of your gifts and your talents, I read somewhere where it says your talents will bring you before great men. your gifts will make room for you. I believe that's true. However, what you do when you come before these great men, and sometimes the great men, they're not going to be somebody famous. They're not going to be somebody that is popular. It's going to be someone that you probably never heard of. You probably wouldn't even think you'd meet, but you don't know who's connected to them or what is connected to them. So it's critical that as we aspire to become the best version of ourselves, that we remain attached to, okay, why do I have this gift and why do I have this talent? It is my observation that people who lock in on that, they reach a point of manifestation and transcendence that other people somehow miss. And when you are aware of the fact that your gift is just that, you didn't earn it, you were born this way. But just because you were born that way, that does not mean you don't have to perfect it. And it's somehow somewhere between the awareness and the understanding and the humility of perfecting. That's when people tend to open up what I would call that pathway toward greatness.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. I would think kind of hard to teeter that line, especially if you haven't been taught to do that. Like you said, that process towards becoming great. I think sometimes, oftentimes even, it can really go to your head. And now you're just this amazing person, but being able to teeter that line between giving back to others while still recognizing and perfecting who you are as a person. I know it can be difficult to do.
Well, in Leading from the Heart, one of the chapters early on asks the questions about, do you know who you are and why you are who you are? And, where'd that come from, right? We want to brag about all the stuff we're good at. We want the light to shine on our greatest moments. But the truth is, everything that's going to make you significant, everything that's going to make you relevant to the people you want to attract, it's not going to be that stuff. It's going to be all the stuff that kept you up at night, all the things that broke your heart and pierced you, the things that you're probably feeling a little bit of shame or guilt about. And I liken it to a wine press or an olive press. When you get in that situation, you look at a little bitty grape or olive, then you realize that there's not a bunch in there. There's not a glass of wine in a grape. There's not a bottle of olive oil in an olive. But when it's crushed, and it's crushed through the things connected to it, the other grapes, the other olives, I'll use that as an analogy for the events in your life.
Yeah.
Then the essence of what's inside comes forth. And that's where our value is when we've been crushed, when these experiences that we want to be shamed of, the things we probably want to hide, those are the very things that are going to birth you, and you thought those things were breaking. When the truth is, the essence of you comes forth from such pressure.
Wow. That was quite insightful. You left me a little speechless, and that does not happen often, Yvonne. That was incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like you were speaking directly to me, not just my listeners there. Thank you. Thank you for that. Taking a slightly different turn, you talk about weaponized empathy. So I know that there are leaders out there who use compassion to heal versus those who are using it to manipulate. Can you give us a real world example of what that manipulation actually looks like in a
Wow.
leadership setting?
Well, are you sure you're ready for that?
I'm not.
Our current climate in the United States,
Yeah, it's crazy.
and over the last 5 years in particular,
Mhm.
people who feel marginalized, othered, unseen, when people know how to speak to your broken pieces, to your voids, then all of a sudden you have this false sense of, I belong to that. You see me, you hear me. all of a sudden, because that void has been addressed, that longing has been met, you find yourself wearing a hat with something on it and attempting to disrupt the transfer of power within a government. Well, that's somebody that has tapped into your broken places. When someone can cause you to look down at others while you think you're building yourself up, and they say, well, it's us versus them. That's when empathy has been weaponized. And you see this a great deal with politicians,
Yeah.
especially now, where you wonder, well, where is everybody's moral compass? The needle's not pointing north.
Right.
Well, the truth is, they had a very good marketing team, some industrial organizational psychologists, and they learned how to message toward you in such a way that you felt that you were part of something when in fact they were just doing that to manipulate you to do something. Now, I'll give you another example. Let's say you're on a date with someone and they know a little about you. Well, see, now the algorithm knows a lot about you.
Right.
The algorithm at TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever other sites you may be visiting. And if you pay attention, you're gonna see this pattern. They give you enough stuff to make you laugh and feel good. Then they give you enough stuff to keep you pissed.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're playing with your brain, because there's a part of the brain called the limbic system and the amygdala. And when your fight or flight responses are triggered, there's an excitement because adrenaline, another chemical, or norepinephrine, or epinephrine is the clinical term, but adrenaline now has been spiking. But then they make you feel like you belong to something. And, the cute little puppy type thing. Now some oxytocin, another neurochemical, another neurotransmitter, has been triggered. So now someone is actually using your neurochemistry with intent to make you do things compulsively and from a primal instinctive place. Well, that's when neurochemistry is being exploited by weaponized empathy. Now, here's the good news. You can do that with yourself too. There's a thing called a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
And if someone touches you and they make you feel special in love, that chemical oxytocin is released in your brain. Now, let me tell you how powerful that stuff is. When a mother has had a natural delivery or even a C-section in pregnancy, that poor lady is laying there needing an episiotomy, meaning stitching to get a vagina back together and all this
Yeah.
turmoil from labor. But the minute that baby is on her chest,
It's a different feeling.
there is
We get
this
all of that.
rush of endorphins and oxytocin.
Mhm.
And it causes not only the pain to go away, and we see this with anesthesia. When you have surgery, one job of anesthesia, it causes you not to remember what happened right before you went into surgery, nor to remember what happened during the surgery, and for you to forget after the surgery what happened. So these effects, you see people try to replicate them through drug abuse, right? Let me drink some more liquor. And you figure, okay, I feel good. Well, yeah, but your liver doesn't feel good over a period of time if you keep doing that. Or let me smoke this blunt, let me vape and stop vaping. That it is not good for you. But for that moment. And then we have to look at this other connection, culturally and socially. Now you got this little group of people. I don't know what they're hitting a pack of cigarettes is about. Doesn't make it do anything, but you're outside and you got a subgroup from the office and you guys start talking about family, relationships. You don't like your boss. So we have to, with giving ourselves empathy, we have to stop and think about, okay, what is validating me? Who is validating me?
Hmm.
What is soothing me? What makes me feel seen? What makes me feel othered? And here's the big one. Where did I get this crap from?
Yeah.
And as we tap into that, we can now start being more willful and intentional with the use of accurate empathy and direct that toward ourselves. And if we can direct that toward ourselves, then we can externalize that to other people.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Most of us spend more time at work than anywhere else doing anything else. So why not spend that time in a job you love? Introducing Triad's Jobs Marketplace, the only job site dedicated specifically to behavioral and mental health professionals. Featuring more than 1,000 open jobs from dozens of behavioral and mental health employers, and searchable by location, professional field, employment type, specialization, and more. Jobs Marketplace helps you find your next career opportunity. Full-time, part-time, or gig time, make the most of your time. To access Jobs Marketplace, register for your free professional account at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and then click to Jobs Marketplace. If you're already a member of the Triad community, visit app.hellotriad.com/jobs. That's app.hellotriad.com/jobs. Visit us today and take your next career step tomorrow.
Wow, nice. And so then using empathy that way, is that where a coach comes in? Because in many people's mind, a coach is the encourager, the one who gives or helps you see the lessons that you should learn.
Mhm.
How would you describe a coach?
A competent coach. So let's start there. Many people who have self-ordained themselves as a coach are anything but. The other part of this is, unless they have an ICF credential, and I'm not knocking people at the early stages, so don't be offended if you have an ACC. You got your foot in the door. But I'm saying if you have a PCC, Professional Certified Coach credential, or preferably an MCC, which is the gold standard for coaching, or the EMCC, Master Practitioner or Senior Practitioner, that's more the European equivalent, which is steeped in research and what have you. You need to have someone that has the credentials and the qualifications to understand, okay, how does the brain work? The brain is different from the mind, so how does the mind work? And what about cognition? And then what about these different aspects of life? Does this person have the background, or do you see a continuing education pattern where this person is staying up to date with their research and staying up to date with best practices and new methodologies? So when you find someone like that, they are able to help you increase your resilience, build your self-efficacy, because they can look at what is indigenous to you, what's organic to you, and help you point that toward whatever is going on in your life or whatever goal you have. And then from that point, begin the migration from where you are toward what you envision yourself and what you deserve to be as a human being and just as yourself.
Okay. And so your book also dives into neuroscience. And we kind of touched on this a few minutes ago, but it dives into the neuroscience behind connection, mirror neurons, oxytocin. We discussed that, cognitive empathy. Can you break that down just a bit more for us? How does understanding that science actually change how we show up in conversations, in our daily lives, in our work history?
I'm going to use a couple of analogies. One analogy is you go in a restaurant or a public space and you see a sign that says slippery when wet. That tells you right now, I probably want to watch my step. Let me pay attention to what I'm doing, right? We also see a sign. If you're on, as much as I fly, this is going to really be a corny one, but for people who fly, you'll get it. You'll see the no sign by the restroom, or you'll see the green light. So, don't even try it. Just stay in your seat. When that's green, I won't have to get up and then stand there and have everybody looking at me, right? Well, that's the same thing, is when we have awareness about ourselves. Why am I thinking this way? Okay, I see evidence of where someone else is. Most of us are walking around. Another example is in fight or flight mode.
Mhm.
And if I always tell people when I lecture and do these master classes, you cannot coach, treat, or counsel someone until the physiology allows the psychology to come forth. Here's an example. If you could picture your rational brain being the CEO, but the security guy, he sees something in the bushes, hears a sound over there. All of a sudden, he grabs the CEO, picks them up, and carries them into a safe room where they can't be threatened. You can't get to them, they're locked away. Well, that's what's going on with many of us. And this is why cognitive empathy becomes important, because cognitive is, how are you functioning, in terms of being aware of your environment, your cognition, so to speak. Well, now, if that security guard has got the part of the brain that's rational, that's introspective, that's proactive, sequestered, and only the security guard only does a couple of things. He'll fight, he'll defend, he may take off and start running, or he'll just kind of shut everybody and everything down. How in the hell are you going to connect with someone under those circumstances? So the thing that we must do is we must be aware of our own cognition. It's a good idea to learn something about the cognition of others, meaning how are they feeling? How are they thinking? What's going on with them? What signs are they presenting when they talk to you? Do you see tears? Do you see a wrinkled forehead? This person's an introvert, now they're talking. Are they an extrovert? Now they're really quiet. And as we become more aware about cognitive empathy, now the opportunity to tell the security guard, hey, stand down. There is no threat. That shadow you see, that's from a light. That noise you heard, that's just a squirrel over in a tree. Let him go. And when the CEO, meaning your brain, comes back online, now the opportunity to actually get some meaningful interaction is far greater. We have to understand that when we use cognitive empathy, we are much more likely to get a desirable outcome rather than one of happenstance and regret.
Okay. Okay. So does that play into then the distinction between someone or a leader performing versus actually being present?
Oh, you couldn't have said that better. Because people, when they're performative, they're not present.
Mhm.
I was doing a lecture the other night, and I asked, I got several MDs in my master class that night, and I asked someone who was not an MD. This was, a PhD type person. I said, when you go to your doctor, how do you feel? Now, let me preface before I ask that person that question. Earlier, I was talking to the physicians, and I said, what is it like when you're engaging a patient? Where's your mind and what's going on? And a majority of them said, I only have 15 minutes. And if I've already been in here 10, then I'm thinking about I'm going to be late to the next patient. And, so I'm really kind of like just wanting to just check the boxes and go on. And then I asked the other people, I said, you heard what these clinicians said. How does that make you feel? Knowing that your doctor is thinking about their watch, what's next, how much time they got. Because if they're thinking about all of that, guess what they're not thinking about? You. And everybody in that group had an issue with that. So, like you're saying, when we're much more concerned about external factors, be it how do I look, how much time do I have, whether I like you or not, am I really present?
Mm.
And where do we get that from? Everywhere. We get that from parental modeling. We get that from cultural and social expectations. We get that from our internal baggage. We get that from the things that are unresolved in our own lives that are passive, latent trauma points. Or we get that because we don't have the ability to slow down and just be present. So a lot of what we see in leaders, and you'll see in Leading from the Heart, I dedicated maybe 20 to 25% of the content in that book to self-awareness, self-regulation, emotional capacity, and empathetic capacity. Because if those things aren't present, I promise you, instead of you building your team, you're sabotaging it from the inside out.
Right, right. And that just that thought of building a team really takes me to the ideas of psychological safety. We actually had another guest maybe a month or so ago, and we were talking about how leaders can create psychological safety within their teams. And I learned from them that it is like that the foundation of a meaningful and a productive team, whether that team is a work team or your family as your team. What are the first two or three things that you would suggest to a leader who needs to build that kind of trust within their team?
This is so counterintuitive, but the first thing is be vulnerable and authentic. There's a time when leaders don't understand that the person that's getting ready to meet with them, especially one-on-one, you're the boss. That person is already in fight or flight mode, more than likely, especially if they're new or if they're introverted or you don't interact with them frequently. So they're coming to you, okay, if I say this, if I don't say that, they're not present. And like I said, before you can coach the psychology, you have to coach the physiology. Now, here's something to remember. Your subconscious mind is far more powerful than your conscious mind. It does things on instinct and on default, right? So when it's coming in the environment, looking at cues on you, well, our first language is not words. It's pitch, tone, and inflection, because you hear that in a normal pregnancy. How do you talk to that baby? Oh, soft, non-threatening tone. And then the next thing is facial expression. That's why a dog is smarter than a human baby, because it's listening to your tone, is looking at your expressions, right? Well, a little toddler, it takes them to be almost 3 years old. And at that point, they start realizing that mommy said, you better stop that. But she whispered, you got the soft tone, but those clenched lips and that brow, that doesn't match the soft tone. Well, as you get a little more evolved between 3 and 7, you start looking at the words. And now, do the words match the tone, the pitch, and the facial expression? So we have this ecosystem that keeps us hypervigilant. What leaders must learn is that all of us have that wounded kid inside. Male, female, I don't care if you're 70. There's a part of you that is very vulnerable. And it may be this much of that kid left, but this much of that kid can disrupt your whole life, right? So we have to come to the table with intention to be non-threatening, to be communicative, to ask questions like, how are you? And not just out of habit, but when someone says, oh, I'm fine, then having the mindful awareness to say, that didn't sound like you're fine. What's going on? Rather than, okay, anyway, right? Like I said, the doctor in the 15 minutes, he's got to get to the next one.
Yep.
So often the leader lacks the awareness to lead from the heart. Again, the title of the book. Because if you lead from the head, you're much more concerned about profit than you are people.
Mm.
The truth is, the more you concern yourself with the people, the bigger your profits.
I can see that. I see that. And I also can see how, for it sounds like even how asking the good questions gives you a better result, and being or shows that you're being mindfully present in that conversation. Can you walk us through like what that really looks like in practice, and how do you train yourself to ask the right questions at the right moment?
Well, I'll give you what I teach coaches. The first thing is your presence sets the stage for the outcome you're going to get. People need to feel safe and secure with you. that begins with you before you even see them, putting whatever's going on with you over here, so that when you come back and that person walks in your door, that mess you're worried about, that thing you're thinking about, you've already allowed some self-compassion and self-empathy to lay that to rest over there so you can be present. So number one is your presence allows the other person to be present. We talked about mirror neuron. So if I come to this meeting regulated, focused, and compassionate, at some level, you're going to give that back to me, especially when you see it's authentic. Second thing, when people are talking to you, let them know that you hear them. Many clinicians don't do this. They'll just listen to what their patient or client said, and then they'll just start talking, like, let's go toward the problem. It's a good idea to coach the person, not the problem, right? Because when you get through dealing with the problem, what's at the core of it? The person. So when people are talking to you, reflect back what they said. An example would be, I come in and I say, man, I've it's been a long day. I'm tired. My money's not right. This relationship, I don't know if I should stay or go. So a reflection is just basically saying what the person said to you, and preferably in your own words or a combination of your words and theirs, and say, yeah, I can hear that you're tired, that, the cost of living is eating at you. And on top of that, your heart feels vulnerable, not knowing, whether you should stay or go. Well, see, that's not just a technique. When you do that, people feel seen. They feel respected. They feel valued. And when someone can feel first safe with you, then feel seen with you, now you are positioning them to be able to put some awareness around what's going on with them, simply because you dysregulated the fight or flight. And then what you put in place of it is the ability to be objective, introspective, and to use cognition and cognitive empathy to help that person not judge themselves, but to accept themselves and know that you accept them too. And when that happens, now you become an advocate, not an adversary.
Right. Absolutely. Completely agree. Completely agree. It almost sounds like a lot of social work techniques as well. I'm a social worker. So a lot of the things that you just mentioned sound like a lot of the things that I use on a daily basis with my patients. So I'm glad to hear that that can be translated into something else. We'll have to talk about that later. So your work has a particular emphasis on the Black community. Why is the conversation about self-empathy and compassionate leadership, why is that especially urgent in this context right now?
Well, I'm going to keep this in the Black community, but I'm going to say every marginalized community. So that could be the community of anybody that has a melanin content where the dominant culture makes them a minority. But that could also be religious beliefs. That also could be gender identity or sexuality.
Yeah.
When we don't acknowledge how we're being affected, how could we be mad if someone else doesn't?
Mm.
So the first step is to accept the fact of how you feel, to look at how people use or weaponize that against you. But the other part is to ask yourself, am I starting to believe the stereotype about me? Am I starting to self-loathe, meaning not like myself or like the group that I come from, because it doesn't live up to the expectations of even family members or others or even self? When we miss paying attention to the places in us that are hurting, that are broken, then the only solution is say, what do I need right now? What do I need? Because if you keep pouring out of your cup you're not going to have anything left. You need to make sure that you have something pouring into you that matches what you're pouring out, because that deficit could, starve you out emotionally, or more than anything else, it could asphyxiate you.
So absolutely. I see it kind of often in people, like you said, marginalized populations that we attempt to ignore the differences or not discuss the things that are happening around us in an attempt to, I guess, assimilate, but then we lose a lot of who we are in that process.
Yes, very
There's a
true.
lot there. Okay. So earlier you mentioned that you are building the Uriel AI, the world's first ecosystem built around ethical intelligence. How does that technology extend the work in your book? And why do you believe ethical intelligence has now surpassed emotional intelligence as what we need most?
Well, we're gatekeepers. There's a focus on money and profit, especially when it comes to AI. AI is something that most people don't understand in general. They know ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. They know what AI is, but what we have to understand is that there are guardrails that need to be present.
Mm.
And that's why when I created Uriel, one of the things that was front and center for me was that I knew this platform I'm creating could influence people to either do something that is not in their better interest, or something that could really take them to the next level. I mean, it could go either way. So when we look at ethical intelligence, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of guardrails are in place? Number one. Number two, what is this thing using as a language learning model to respond to you? Like, how has it been structured? And what was the intention between the architecture? We see this with algorithms on social media. I mean, good example. If you look at a shoe, or you look at a purse or something, what shows up in your feed?
The
Shoes,
same shoes and
purses,
purses. Yep.
right? So the algorithm is identifying things based on input. So when we look at things that, especially coaching AIs or behavioral AIs, or things that have to do with creating certain approaches to business, we have to ask ourselves, one, is it ethical? What frameworks are being employed here? Are we taking cultural bias and making that a part of this? Like, I remember early on when they were talking about using AI for security in public spaces like airports and wherever. They had a different approach when they looked at people of color or people from other countries, as they automatically alerted for more often than they did from people that were indigenous to the regular culture, right? An
Mhm.
example, if you're an African American in America, the odds of you being pulled over and mistreated by law enforcement is significantly higher than if you, and we see this with ICE right now, right? Or if you're someone that is not going to drink the Kool-Aid, now you've been othered too. So we
Mhm.
have to look at what we do in technology to make sure that we don't have the worst of humanity show up in our technology.
Mhm.
Another thing that I did when I created Euro is I made sure that it was sound and based on frameworks that were evidence and research based. And I can't give away the secret sauce. My stack developers would kill me, or I'd probably want to choke them out if they revealed it too. But there's a serious contribution of what is the LLM using in order to respond to the input of the user. So again, ethical intelligence is just that, using ethics, best practices, and some standards that, again, put people first and increase their autonomy and their resilience, but more than anything else, build their character to be a better person.
Very nice. Very nice. So, if someone is listening today that's in a leadership role, whether that is a manager, a coach, a clinician, a parent, even, and they feel completely depleted, what is the one thing they can do today to start leading from the heart?
First thing is, I said this earlier in the interview, what do I need right now? Just ask yourself, what do I need? And I can guarantee you that there is a book Gary Chapman wrote called Five Love Languages. But the truth is, it's the five validation systems, right? Acts of service, touch, words, gifts, acts of service, whatever. And we have to ask ourselves, okay, what do I need right now? Now, why do I need that? What is going on in here that I need that? The other part is to forgive yourself, to realize that many of your beliefs aren't yours. They were passed down. And it's okay to question Big Mama and Grandmama and Uncle and Auntie and my peer group, because a lot of people are on autopilot and they're using social media, getting one dopamine hit at a time in order to feel fulfilled, validated, seen, or wanted. And we have to pull ourselves out of that space and deconstruct so that we can build ourselves the way we intended.
Very nice. Thank you. And Dr. D. Yvonne Young, I honestly could sit and talk with you for probably the rest of the day. But as we come to a close, for everyone who wants to go deeper with your work, read your book, and connect with you directly, where can they find you?
Just go into Google or whatever search engine you use, and it's Dr. D, the initial D like in Derek, but by itself, Yvonne, spelled just like Ivan Young. You can find me there. Just go in there and you could type in TEDx and you'll find TED Talks. Or you could type in books and you'll find Simon and Schuster and Post Hill Press for my books. Or you could just go .com and go to the website. My greatest concern is this. Everything I do is about helping the people who cross my path to have a better life, to be respected, loved, feel seen and validated. It is my belief that all of us play a role. We're all connected. That thing about 7 degrees of separation is true if you're in a big city, but if you're in a small town, it's more like 2 or 3, right? And meaning somebody that knows you knows somebody that knows somebody that knows you type thing. When we look at it, we have to be kind. Instead of allowing us to be divided by beliefs and preferences and politics and melanin content, hair texture, let's remember that that person that you're sitting talking to, they're dealing with the same, what in life that you're dealing with. They want the same thing for their children that you want for your children. And if you can interact with my brand or my books, whether it's Break Up, Don't Break Down, that's an evidence and research book to heal your heart and find the love of your life. And that starts with loving you. Or if you're reading something like Leading from the Heart, and you really want to be a more effective leader and you want people to treat you better, then that starts with how do you treat yourself. But just Google me and we'll be happy to make sure that we connect with you.
Very nice. Thank you so much. And I really have appreciated you speaking with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's just a blessing to have you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, and more at Behavioral Health Today. And if you like our show, make sure to give us 5 stars and leave us a review. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.